Hello and welcome to Theta Sigma's Doctor Who podcast number 22. With no feedback from last week's show, not even a comment from Facebook surprisingly, I've only one item to talk about before we get into today's leather bikini clad show. I have for some time now been thinking about making Theta Sigma's Doctor Who page purely dedicated to this podcast. There are several reasons for this, but the main one is that I simply don't have the time to post in the daily manner that is expected of most Doctor Who pages on Facebook. If I turn the page over completely to the podcast and post as and when I can on the podcast topic for that week, it reduces significantly the amount of work involved. Yes, I know I could look for some admins, and indeed a couple of people have already offered their services, but to be honest I prefer it this way, as I can keep a tighter rein on what gets posted and the posts that are accepted on the page. There won't be any significant changes to the page itself other than fewer posts, and those posts being related to the topic of that week's podcast. If you have any thoughts about the changes I'm making, do let me know by emailing at respectthething@outlook.com or posting on this podcast or inboxing me at Theta Sigma's Doctor Who page. And now, on with today's episode.
I am Leela of the Sava team.
Louise Jameson, born on the 20th of April 1951 in Wanstead in London, is the English actress best known for playing Leela, the leather-clad barbarian warrior companion of the Fourth Doctor. Jameson has also appeared on Emmerdale as Sharon Crosswaite, The Omega Factor as Dr. Anne Reynolds, Tenko as Blanche Simmons, Bergerac as Susan Young, and EastEnders as Rosa DeMarco. And she recently worked on the BBC Scotland soap River City as Viv Roberts, and is a regular in Doc Martin. Jameson attended the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art and spent 2 years with the Royal Shakespeare Company performing in Romeo and Juliet, The Taming of the Shrew, King Lear, Summerfolk, and Blithe Spirit. In 1995, she appeared in the Royal Shakespeare production of Botho Strauss's The Park. Other stage appearances include the first production of Peter Nicholls' Passion Play, produced at the Aldwych Theatre in London in 1981. Jameson reprised the character of Leela in the charity special Dimensions in Time, and continues to do so to this day for the Doctor Who audio plays produced by Big Finish Productions. She is the subject of MJTV's The Actor Speaks Volume 5, where she discusses herself, her acting career, and the various series she's been in. In 2007, Jameson toured nationally with her one-woman show, Face Value, inspired by her near decision to have a facelift. In April 2008, she joined the cast of the BBC Scotland soap River City. In the same year, she guest-starred in the Sapphire and Steel drama Wall of Darkness for the same company. In 2010, it was announced that she would be starring in the Dark Shadows audio drama London's Burning, written by Joseph Lister. Jameson has 2 sons in the 1980s, Harry and Tom. She's also good friends with her Big Finish Productions co-star Lala Ward, and for many years she's lived in Tunbridge Wells in Kent. She was a regular prison visitor during the first few years of her career, and during the early 1970s she met Leslie Grantham at Ley Hill Prison in Gloucestershire while he was serving 12 years of a life sentence for murder. She encouraged Grantham to become an actor, and by 1985 he had secured the role of Den Watts in EastEnders. She also works as a teacher of drama, directing youth productions of Shakespeare for local festivals, and runs a Sunday drama college with branches in Tunbridge Wells and Eastbourne.
I am here to be taught. The Doctor is gifting me an education.
But what of Leela, the leather-clad so-called something-for-the-fathers character that joined the Fourth Doctor on his travels shortly after the departure of Sarah Jane Smith? The character of Leela was first conceived by producer Philip Hinchcliffe and script editor Robert Holmes. They wanted a companion in the mould of the George Bernard Shaw Eliza Doolittle character. Bright but unsophisticated. Primitive, but who would learn from the Doctor. Writer Chris Boucher had submitted a story proposal entitled The Mentor Conspiracy, which featured a character named Leela, fitting Hinchcliffe's and Holmes's ideas. Although The Mentor Conspiracy was not produced, Boucher reused the character of Leela for The Day That God Went Mad, later renamed The Face of Evil, seeing her as a mixture of Emma Peel from The Avengers and Leela Khaled. Boucher was asked to write 2 endings for The Face of Evil, one in which Leela left with the Doctor, and one in which she stayed behind. The decision to have Leela become a companion was made soon after. An oft-repeated story is that Leela's skimpy leather outfits were very popular with the dads, which kept them watching the programme. According to the official DVD release of The Face of Evil in 2012, Louise Jameson won the role of Leela over 26 other hopeful actresses, auditioned between the 10th of August and August the 25th, 1976. Emily Richard was producer Philip Hinchcliffe's first choice, but when she was made unavailable, Sue Jones-Davies, Lydia Liesel, Janet Eddis, Susan Woodridge and Carol Drinkwater were shortlisted along with Louise Jameson. As Tom Baker was not available for her audition, director Pennant Roberts played the part of the Doctor. Jameson was given the role on August 26, 1976. Despite not being on the final shortlist, Pamela Salem won a small voice role in Leela's debut story The Face of Evil, followed by a substantial part in the next story, The Robots of Death. Leela was the daughter of Sol. She first appears in the 1977 serial The Face of Evil, where she was a warrior of the savage Sevateem tribe, who were amongst the descendants of the crew of an Earth ship from the Maudie expedition that crash-landed on an unnamed planet in the far future. The name of her tribe, Sevateem, was a corruption of Survey Team. Although the Doctor at this point was content to travel alone, Leela barged into the TARDIS and continued to accompany the Doctor on his journeys. While she was a primitive, Leela was also highly intelligent, grasping advanced concepts easily and translating them into terms she could cope with. Despite the Doctor's attempts at civilizing her, however, Leela was strong-willed enough to continue in her savage ways. She usually dressed in animal skins and was armed with a knife or a set of poisonous Janus thorns, which she didn't hesitate to use on people who threatened her, much to the Doctor's disapproval. Leela frequently demonstrated a highly accurate sense of danger. Although Jameson's eyes are naturally blue, as Leela she initially wore red contact lenses to make them brown. However, the contact lenses severely limited her vision, and producer Graham Williams promised her she could stop wearing them. To explain this change in story, writer Terence Dix wrote a scene in the 1977 serial The Horror of Fang Rock, in which Leela's eyes suffer a pigment dispersal and turn blue after viewing the expulsion of the Rutan ship. In her travels with the Doctor, Leela faced killer robots, the Rutan host, and the Sontaran invasion of the Doctor's home planet Gallifrey. During this final adventure, the invasion of time, she meets and falls in love with Andred, a native Gallifreyan, and decides to stay behind with him. This exit for her character was created when Louise Jameson had announced her intention to leave the show. Tom Baker disliked Leela's character concept because he felt that she was too violent. Jameson reports that he was cold to her for the first several stories they did together. Eventually, however, during the filming of The Horror of Fang Rock, she insisted on multiple retakes of a scene in which he repeatedly entered the scene early, thereby upstaging her. This incident appears to have increased Baker's respect for her, and their working relationship substantially improved thereafter. Leela's subsequent life on Gallifrey is not explored in the television series, although the spin-off media have done so to an extent. The Virgin New Adventures novel Lungbarrow by Mark Platt, Leela and Andred are expecting a child, the first naturally conceived baby on Gallifrey for millennia. Louise Jameson reprised the role of Leela for the 1993 charity special Dimensions in Time, and has voiced the character in 4 series of audio plays for Big Finish Productions taking place on Gallifrey, alongside Lalla Ward as Romana and John Leeson as K9. In the Gallifrey audio series, Leela acts as Romana's bodyguard, advisor and friend. Being a human in the presence of so much Time Lord biology vastly extends Leela's lifespan, as well as keeping her relatively youthful. However, if she ever left them, she would quickly age to death. During the course of the Gallifrey series, Leela and Andred divorce after Andred fakes his death to infiltrate the Celestial Intervention Agency. Andred is subsequently killed, and Leela is blinded during a Gallifreyan civil war, which also results in her version of K9 being destroyed. She is taken out of time to avoid her perishing with the rest of Gallifrey. She follows Romana through several alternate universes, regaining her eyesight in one when she is forced to ingest vampire blood to enhance her physical capabilities, her unique physiology allowing her to be physically enhanced by the blood without experiencing the negative mental side effects that others have endured. How she returns to her universe has yet to be divulged. Leela joins the cast of Jago and Lightfoot audio series at the end of the second series. She is sent by Romana to investigate breaks in time in Victorian London. While Leela does not appear in any of the Virgin Missing adventures, she has appeared in several of the past Doctor adventures, including 4 novels by Chris Boucher, pairing her with the Fourth Doctor. Leela appears to survive the Time War, and features in a trilogy of Companion Chronicles audio stories in which she is now dying, aging a year per day as the powers of the Time Lords no longer keep her from death. Starting with The Catalyst, which is primarily a flashback to an adventure before the horror of Fang Rock, an elderly leader is being interrogated by the Zani warrior, a race encountered by the Third Doctor. How Leela ends up in custody is unknown, but they question her to learn what secrets she may know of a legendary lost world, presumed to be Gallifrey. It's almost certain that her sight has returned, and she can describe her interrogator's armour. Leela manages to trick him, and he dies at her feet while she is still strapped to the machines that are just barely keeping her alive. She tells more stories of her past to a child that is also held prisoner in the room. In her final tale, The Time Vampire, she recalls how K9 briefly flew into the time vortex and she had a vision of an ancient woman. Once her tale is told and she feels ready to die, K9 suddenly appears before her, frees her from her shackles and guides her soul to its next stage. In 2011, Jameson reprised the role of Leela alongside Tom Baker as the Fourth Doctor for a series of audio dramas for Big Finish. These dramas began to be released in January 2012 and are the adaptations of stories planned for TV but never produced, as well as original storylines set in the gap between the talons of Wen Chiang and the horror of Fang Rock. And that's all we have time for this week. As always, thanks for listening, and if you do have any feedback, feel free to leave it on this post, or to message me at Theta Sigma's Doctor Who page, or email me at respectthething@outlook.com. Next week, we look at the 7th Doctor, Sylvester McCoy. Until then...
Well, goodbye, my boy. You did quite well. Quite well. It's reassuring to know that my future is in safe hands.
Thank you for listening to Theta Sigma's Doctor Who podcast. Doctor Who and its associated shows are all copyright and property of the BBC, and no infringement is intended.